Hello everyone, welcome to back my channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before starting the video, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The MCU's newest villain death breaks a major villain trend in the franchise in a suitably dramatic and exciting fashion. The MCU timeline hasn't been short of villains or antagonists of any variety for some obvious reasons, with a good chunk of Marvel's most iconic supervillains having made their debut over the course of the close to 2 decades the franchise has now been running. A lot of said villains have already had their stories cut shorter than their comic counterparts, as plenty of antagonists have died in their first ever MCU appearance after squaring up against a Marvel hero. While this can seem a shame in terms of preventing future appearances, or at least making them much more complicated, it does also mean there's a fascinating range of villain deaths to look at over the course of the MCU's history. It also makes it all the more interesting when a release kills a villain off in a way that contrasts with the usual convention of both the MCU's releases and the traditions of the superhero genre as a whole, as has recently been the case with the MCU's latest villain to be placed on the proverbial on-screen chopping block. Unsurprisingly, most of the demises of antagonists in MCU releases are down to the hero they face, much like the majority of superhero movies and shows, be they Marvel or otherwise. This can obviously happen via the protagonist directly killing the villain they find themselves facing off against, though MCU releases often instead have this be because the villain inadvertently orchestrates their own death in some grand manner during their conflict with their rival, or actively sacrifices themselves. Indeed, since the MCU has historically tried to veer on the side of family-friendly releases, it's been pretty common for a hero to thwart their enemy right up until they do something that leads to their elaborate downfall and death. For example, this crops up more than once in the Thor movie series, as Thor orchestrates Hela being killed by Surtur by sacrificing Asgard to ensure her destruction in Thor Ragnarok, and Gorr dies from the effects of the Necrosword after being moved by Thor's love for Jane Foster in Thor, Love and Thunder. On a similar note, Mysterio dies from a gunshot wound from a drone he was controlling to try and kill Spider-Man in Spider-Man Far From Home, though he stages things to look as though Spider-Man killed him. In much the same vein, Icarus actively flies into the sun in the final act of Eternals after being beaten by his former allies, and Dar-Ben appears to die in the Marvels after tearing a hole in reality, following her once again turning on the story's main hero trio after losing a fight to them. However, the franchise is also often just willing to have a hero directly kill the villain of the story, with some examples coming from Black Widow and Black Panther. Though it's worth noting T'Challa offers Killmonger a chance to survive the wounds he inflicted on him, as well as the first and second Guardians of the Galaxy movies, where Ronan is vaporized by Star-Lord with the Power Stone, and Ego is then destroyed via an explosive placed and detonated by the Guardians. All of this combines to make one story decision in Daredevil. Born Again all the more surprising. Daredevil Born Again Episode 7 provides a far more grounded and far less hero-focused take on villain deaths when Marvel villain Muse is instead shot down by a civilian. After Bastion Cooper reveals his serial killer secret identity to his therapist, Heather Glenn, he prepares to kill her and add her to his portfolio of twisted murderous art, attempting to convince her that this is a good thing because she had inspired him to begin killing people and being the version of himself he considered the true and authentic iteration. However, this doesn't end well for Muse. Daredevil arrives to save Glenn, and while he certainly distracts the character by once again brawling with him, it's Glenn who actually finishes the fight, shooting Muse several times in the chest and killing him off. Though the show realistically explores the traumatic after effects of both this attack and Glenn killing Muse, showing this wasn't a straightforward sort of victory, it does mean the Marvel villain was taken down by a civilian with seemingly no fighting training, which feels especially unique for the franchise given its usual approach to these moments. Daredevil. Born Again follows in the footsteps of its predecessor, Daredevil, in terms of trying to ensure its street-level hero story is as grounded as a superhero narrative can conventionally be, with very few characters having any notable superpowers, and things usually revolving around figures who are more similar to those you could meet in real life than the likes of Groot or Ego the Living Planet. As such, having one of its villains be dispatched by a regular person with a gun feels appropriate, and underlines that these characters are largely conventional humans despite the world they exist in. Having Heather Glenn be so personally involved with the death of Muse also reinforces why she might find herself more motivated to learn more about Daredevil, which could justify her learning Matt Murdock's vigilant identity later down the line, or otherwise explain why Glenn's story may become more intertwined with the idea of vigilance, allowing the story to weave more narrative threads together. On a more straightforward level, it's also a great plot twist in its own right, as the rarity of civilians killing villains makes this all the more striking of a moment. That said, this decision is, funnily enough, somewhat more akin to the original MCU Iron Man movies, where it's actually Pepper Potts who's often more directly responsible for villain deaths, having pressed the button that drops Obadiah Stane to his death in Iron Man, and having murdered Killian in Iron Man 3. In the same vein, it's also possible the decision made in Daredevil. Born Again serves another purpose, in that it avoids Daredevil himself from having to make that choice, allowing him to keep questioning his morals and whether he might have made the newest villain death, flipping one of the biggest superhero movie and show traditions. The Marvel Cinematic Universe, MCU, has consistently set a high bar for storytelling, character development, and world building. From its inception, the franchise has been characterized by a blend of action, humor, and heartfelt moments. But one element has remained mostly unchanged throughout its history: the treatment of villains. Typically, these antagonists follow a somewhat predictable arc, doomed to fail in their pursuits, and often meeting their end at the hands of the very heroes they oppose. However, with the introduction of the MCU's newest villain, Death, the franchise is poised to flip one of the most enduring traditions in superhero cinema on its head, a move that promises to redefine not only the characters involved, but the entire fabric of the MCU. Redefining villainy ***. Death, as a character, brings a new dimension to villainy in the MCU. Traditionally, villains are often defined by their desire for power, revenge, or chaos. They are characters who exist in opposition to the heroes, often lacking the depth or complexity that truly makes them memorable. However, Death is crafted as a multifaceted character whose motivations are rooted more in existential philosophy than mere malice. This shift allows audiences to explore themes surrounding mortality, the cycle of life and death, and the moral dilemmas tied to their perceptions of good and evil. Unlike many previous MCU foes, Death represents an inevitability, a force of nature rather than just a malevolent individual. As a result, she does not seek to conquer or destroy for the sake of chaos. Instead, her motives are drawn from the very essence of existence itself, presenting her as a character who challenges the heroes to confront their understanding of life. This departure from conventional villainy compels audiences to reevaluate who or what constitutes a villain. Is Death itself the true enemy, or are the heroes also fighting against their own denial of mortality, highlighting an intricate moral grayness? Breaking the cycle of doom ***. One of the most iconic tropes within the superhero genre has been the clear-cut resolution of conflicts. Villains are defeated, often in climactic battles marked by tension, visual effects, and emotional stakes. They are vanquished, sometimes dramatically, ensuring that the heroes emerge victorious. However, with Death, the MCU initiates a potentially groundbreaking narrative direction. Imagine a scenario where death does not meet an end, but rather an understanding. In the traditional model, a climactic fight results in the hero overcoming the antagonist. Yet, what if death, instead of being defeated, chooses to negotiate or collaborates with the heroes? This can shift the emphasis from the need for victory to a dialogue, a challenge to our perceptions of life, rebirth, and loss. The heroes could find themselves deeply introspective, exploring their beliefs about power and responsibility in the face would not only elevate death above the typical villain archetype, but also explore how heroes process the notion of their own timelines and the lifespans of those they protect. The narrative would force them to confront what immortality means, leading to thoughtful discussions about sacrifice and legacy. The stakes shift from a straightforward defeat to a moral quandary. Can characters learn to coexist with the very concept they've always fought against? Creating new alliances ***. By flipping the traditional villain arc, the MCU has a unique opportunity to redefine the relationships between its heroes and anti-heroes alike. Death's presence could pave the way for unlikely alliances, promoting a narrative where former adversaries must come together to navigate the complexities of their existence. Consider the potential dynamics between characters like Thanos and Death. While they have historically been aligned as adversaries, imagine if their relationship evolved into one of begrudging respect or even partnership. Thanos, once driven by madness and ambition, might be forced to confront his own ideals in the light of Death's perspective. This evolution reinforces the idea that redemption is possible even for the most notorious of villains. Furthermore, we could see heroes from across the MCU's expansive landscape banding together to face death, not as an enemy to be slain, but as a fundamental force of nature that brings them together. This could lead to character-driven narratives where heroes grapple with grief, acceptance, and the understanding that death doesn't necessarily imply malice. This cooperative approach reshapes the battle structure that has defined the MCU for over a decade and could offer new storytelling avenues, emotional beats, and character growth. Exploring emotional depth ***. The emotional stakes of having death as an antagonist also present a unique opportunity for nuanced storytelling. Traditionally, the death of a character is either a dramatic plot point or a tragic loss, often falling into a cycle of redemption or revenge. However, with death at the narrative forefront, the mechanics of loss become an integral part of the character's development. How do heroes cope with the concept of inevitable loss? How do they navigate their relationships with fallen comrades or loved ones? These questions become central to not just the narrative, but the emotional resonance of the film or series. Death invites characters to explore grief in its many forms, how to honor those lost, how to react to the fluctuating nature of life, and ultimately, how to accept mortality as a part of the human experience. For instance, imagine a storyline where some beloved characters face the specter of death, not in battle but in conversation, understanding their limitations, their fears, and what they leave behind. The presence of death can prompt characters to reflect on their legacies, driving home the theme of living a meaningful life in the face of mortality. This emotional maturity not only elevates the storytelling, but also connects viewers to the characters on a profoundly human level. ***, fans' expectation of change ***. As the MCU continues to unfold, fans have been vocal about wanting fresh perspectives and innovative storytelling. By flipping the script on traditional villain archetypes with death, the franchise creates a compelling narrative that reflects contemporary concerns surrounding mortality and acceptance. Such a transition would allow the MCU to stay relevant in an ever-evolving cultural landscape, while challenging viewers to think beyond traditional binaries of hero and villain. The introduction of death promises to keep audiences enthralled as they navigate the complexities of love, loss, and acceptance. As fans look toward the next phases of the MCU, The expectation for change is clear, and death embodies that necessary evolution. No longer are villains mere obstacles. They are figures that reflect the deeply intertwined nature of life's struggles. *** Conclusion. A new era for the MCU ***. The MCU's newest villain, Death, flips one of the most stalwart traditions of superhero movies, the idea that villains must be defeated and eradicated. By positioning her as a character of complexity rather than simple malevolence, the franchise opens exciting doors for storytelling, emotional depth, and moral questioning.